Number 474, Senator Pratte.
Moved by the Honourable Senator Pratte, seconded by the Honourable Senator Marwal, that a special committee on prosecutorial independence may I dispense on debate. Senator Pratte.
Thank you, Your Honour. Honourable Senators, I know it's late, so I promise this may hurt a little bit, but it will be short. Honourable Senators, when I spoke a month ago on Senator Smith's motion and Senator Harder's amendment, I said that we in the Senate should seek the truth, and that by seeking the truth, we would be serving Canadians. Now, with Ms. Wilson-Raybould's written testimony and recording, and with Mr. Butt's own written testimony, the truth is pretty well known in all its details. However, interpretations of this truth vary considerably. These interpretations need to be examined with rigorous objectivity in order for us to draw sound conclusions and find useful solutions. Most importantly, we need to thoroughly reflect on ways to prevent this type of situation in the future. Such controversies undermine Canadians' confidence in the administration of justice. This is where the Senate can play a complementary role. Senator Plet's motion suffers from many of the same defects as Senator Smith's motion. It employs exactly the same language. The only difference is that instead of requiring the committee to hear a long list of witnesses, it lists only one, the former Attorney General. Frankly, after all that we've heard and read, I wonder what else we could learn by having Ms. Wilson-Raybould appear. But the hope is obviously to continue to embarrass the government. On the other hand, the government's
Order, please.
On the other hand, the government's aim is to put an end to the controversy. Our objective as an independent Senate should be neither to prolong nor to stifle the scandal, but to provide a thorough review of the facts and their possible interpretations. Through a thorough review, and most of all, we should suggest a way forward. Chers collègues, les faits sont maintenant connus.
Colleagues, the facts are now known. The committee that I'm suggesting the creation of should not have to investigate what has happened, but rather reflect upon the meaning of what has happened and lessons to be drawn from it. Was the pressure placed on the Attorney General appropriate or not? And based on what principles can we base this conclusion? How does the Shawcross doctrine apply to the modern Canadian context? In the future, is it possible to specify in which rare circumstances the Attorney General can intercede in the affairs of the Public Prosecution Service? The remediation agreement set out recently in the Criminal Code also deserves further thought. Among the questions the Special Committee could focus on is this: how should we understand the apparent contradiction between, on the one hand, the objectives of these agreements of to reduce the negative consequences of the wrongdoing for persons, employer, customers, pensioners, and others who did not engage in the wrongdoing, and on the other hand, the factors that the prosecutors must not take into account for corruption of foreign agents, in particular national economic interests? Should we provide additional guidelines to the Public Prosecution Service for reparation agreements? The Justice Committee and the other place heard from only 5 witnesses on these issues and did not draw any conclusions. A Senate committee could do much better, and that is what I am proposing in my motion. Some will say that these are theoretical, legal, or technical questions. They are not theoretical. They are fundamental issues and matters of public policy in administration of justice. We must answer them if we want to truly understand the meaning and the gravity of what has happened and to propose means to prevent it from happening again.
Functions of Minister of Justice and of Attorney General should be separated, with only the Minister of Justice attending cabinet meetings. In the Canadian context, this would be a major change that the Special Committee could and should study. I note that in the United Kingdom, where this has been the practice for decades, there nonetheless have been controversies around the independence of the Attorney General. Some will say that this special committee's mandate would resemble the task given by the Prime Minister to former Attorney General Anne McLellan. This is true, although there is nothing in Ms. McClellan's mandate regarding remediation agreements. More importantly, Ms. McClellan is not Parliament. Her advice to the Prime Minister will undoubtedly be very valuable, but many heads are better than one. Moreover, she will not do her work in public, as a Senate committee would do, thereby educating both the public and parliamentarians on these complex issues. Colleagues, this controversy, however you interpret it, cannot be ignored. Many of us, I know, feel that they're in a bind. On one hand, adopting either of Senator Smith or Senator Pratte's motions would have us play the opposition game. On the other hand, doing nothing would have us apparently favor the government. This is why I try to suggest a different, more neutral, senatorial approach. If this motion is adopted, a special committee would be formed. This is Senator Dalphon's idea, and it's a good one because all the other committees, including the Legal Affairs Committee, are overloaded with work. The mandate of the committee is set out in the motion. It is to examine and report on the independence of the Public Prosecution Service of Canada and of the Attorney General of Canada, to report on the separation of the functions of Minister of Justice and of Attorney General of Canada, and on other initiatives that could promote the integrity of the administration of justice, and to study remediation agreements, notably the provision that excludes the consideration of the national economic interest. This special Senate committee would be composed of 6 ISG senators, 3 Conservative senators, and 1 independent Liberal senator. Therefore, each group would be represented in the same proportion as in the Senate. The committee would report back on June the 1st at the latest. Because time is short, it would be allowed to meet while the Senate is sitting and during break weeks. Honourable Senators, I believe this is a balanced, rigorous and moderate approach that allows us to avoid either a political circus or political paralysis. Yes, there is a real risk that some senators will use this forum for partisan purposes. However, I'm confident that most Canadians will prefer an independent, thoughtful examination of the issues and will not look kindly on senators whose only interest is to score political points. I move this motion so that the Senate does not sit on the sidelines while fundamental questions on the administration of justice in this country are being asked. I move this motion in the hope that this Senate will have the opportunity to do what it does best: delve into the issues, review them with rigor and objectivity, and suggest solutions. I move this motion in the hope, perhaps naive, that even in the most difficult of circumstances, the Senate can find a non-partisan path forward for doing its work, for carrying out its duty. It may be that the only way to counter partisanship is partisanship in return. I hope this is not the case. This is why I'm moving this motion. Will the committee hear from Jody Wilson-Raybould? Will it invite PMO officials who have not been heard yet? It will be for the committee to decide if such appearances are necessary for it to fulfill its mandate. Honourable Senators, let us continue to show Canadians that there is a different way of doing politics. Let us show them that sober second thought really means what it really means, even in the difficult context of this controversy. Chers collègues, le Sénat doit relever le défi que les circonstances.
Colleagues, the Senate must address the challenge that the circumstances have arisen. It must not shirk at this challenge. It must not allow itself to be paralyzed by fear of controversy or failure. The creation of this special committee, raises some risks. But I am seeking a nonpartisan, independent, objective path that is defined other than being a matter of opposition for opposition. Taking action may be risky, but inaction also creates risks. We run the risk of seeming like a chamber that lacks courage and relevance. When we are asked where we were when this crisis was unfolding, we will have to respond, oh, we were debating such and such a bill.
Order. Why don't you just try to listen for once? You might learn something. Pour ma part, j'aimerais pouvoir dire.
Personally, I would like to be able to say that we were there, we studied the issue in depth with objectivity and rigor, and we, above all, proposed solutions. I would like to be able to say, this is today's independent Senate.
Senator Housakos.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Senator Pratte, I was listening quite attentively, and I find it very interesting that all of a sudden you've had this profound interest in the Public Prosecution Service of Canada. You know, you mentioned in your speech about the interpretation of the truth. Where we come from as parliamentarians on this side, the truth is only one. It's not open to interpretation. Unfortunately, over the last couple of months on the other side of the House, there's been a Prime Minister and a Prime Minister's office and a clerk of the Privy Council, unfortunately, who all they've been doing is interpreting the truth. And that's why we have today more questions than we have answers. And that's why after more than 2 months in this unfortunate affair where we have a Prime Minister of Canada being accused of obstruction of justice, the media on a daily basis and the Canadian public are still asking difficult questions they don't have answers to. All we've gotten from the other side is we've lost the top member of the civil service in a resignation, a guy who had the opportunity of going twice before a committee of justice of the House. We lost the principal secretary and the senior most advisor to the Prime Minister, who's had the opportunity to express himself twice to that Justice Committee. And we have the Attorney General, who's at the core of this whole issue, who herself systematically has brought evidence forward where she's pushed back. It's not a question, I'm on debate. We're on debate. So,
Senators, I have recognized Senator Housakos on debate. He's not building up to a question. He's actually on debate. Senator Housakos.
Mr. Speaker, in due time, eventually we'll all learn the rules in this place. And more importantly, in due time, the government will also learn the rules of the essential element of our parliament, the separation of the judiciary, the legislative, and the executive. And at the end of the day, that's the game that's being played here, Senator Pratte. We have a government and a Prime Minister that has encroached upon the most serious principles of this Parliament. He has had 23 successors before him. Not one has ever been accused of this most egregious crime and breach of a parliamentary principle. Not one. 150 years, not one Attorney General, not one Minister of Justice has ever accused the Prime Minister of interfering in a criminal prosecution case. This is the first time. And we have a parliament in place on the other side with a majority government that is hindering the Committee of Justice of that parliament of asking the difficult questions to whomever the committee wants to bring before them. And Senator Pratte has put forward a motion here that is very reasonable. And the people of Canada, the media in this country are crying for justice and are crying for clarity. And all we've had here for a number of weeks from Trudeau-appointed senators and from the government leader is using procedural attempts, we know what they are, points of order, and getting up in order to drag this motion out and prevent it from actually being exercised, and calling the players that have been accused of a very serious breach to come before a Senate committee, yes, an independent one, where Trudeau-appointed senators will have the majority on it and have their opportunity to show how independent they actually are, and ask the questions to the former Attorney General and any other witnesses that we think would be able to shed light on this particular issue. Now, I will just conclude because I have a lot to say on this issue and I want to prepare a speech. But I want to say the Public Prosecution Office of Canada has been around for a long time. The Ministry of Justice has been around for a long time. Our process in changing the rules of how the Ministry of Justice works are clear. The Cabinet, the Minister, with the officials of Justice Department, can table legislation in the House of Commons, can send that legislation for proper and thorough debate at the Committee of Justice, can get it through the House of Commons, get it over to the upper chamber, send it to a standing committee that we have here, Justice Senate Committee, that's been around for years and is very respected. And how many times is our Justice Committee's work being quoted in the Supreme Court of Canada through the years? Even more often than that, work of the House of Commons Justice Committee. So we don't need a special committee. Just because Justin Trudeau showed up and he doesn't know how the rules of Parliament work, we're going to create special committees. We're going to infringe upon the rights and privileges of the Justice Committee of the House and the Justice Committee of the Senate because Justin Trudeau just doesn't agree with it. He's had a track record of when he does things that are egregious to the rules of Parliament, he changes them. The government leader, we summon him as the government leader to the Senate, but he'll be modeled as the representative. But he summoned him as the government leader because those are the rules. So, colleagues, this is, again, another example of games that are being played in this chamber in order to circle the wagon, to defend the Prime Minister that has done something the Canadian public, the press, and people for weeks have been calling upon him to respond to clearly and unequivocally. So, Mr. Speaker, I think a number of senators in this side of the chamber have a lot to say on this, and that's why I will ask to take adjournment for the balance of my time.
It is moved by the Honourable Senator Housakos, seconded by the Honourable Senator Martin, that further debate be adjourned for the balance of his time till the next sitting of the Senate. Is it your pleasure, Honourable Senators, to adopt the motion? Adopt, carry.